Welcome to Ogles channel, thanks for watching today, and let's continue our journey to finish every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. And today we're focused on a game called We're Back, a dinosaur story for the original Game Boy. Now I never had like this particular game growing up, however I obviously saw the movie as a kid. I didn't see it in theaters, but some reason or another, like whenever I was sick, we'd rent it from the local drugstore. That's where we'd rent a lot of our video games growing up. You know, we'd pick up the medicine for the illness, and then get a little video to watch while we recuperated as kids. And We're Back, some reason or another, was a video I rented a lot when I was sick. And so I have memories of it. I can't say they're all like fantastic memories, and I can't say I remember like the entire storyline to the movie. However, obviously if I kept renting it as a kid, I did enjoy it to some degree. But the game itself for We're Back is a little bit on the different side because it is a platforming adventure. However, I was reading about it and like this is a very generic game. And what I mean by that is this game came out in multiple regions around the world, but it's by a different title everywhere that it came out. Here in North America, they changed the sprites to be to match up with We're Back, the dinosaur story. But if you were in Europe, you got a game called Baby T-Rex. If you were over in Sweden, you got a game called Bamsy. And if you were in Australia, you got a game called Agrostar. And all of these games are exactly the same, except they're going to change the main character sprite. And so it's one of those games where it's going to be a platforming adventure that's so generic that they can just simply change the main character and it's going to match up with whatever story you want to go with. And so most likely when the We're Back movie was coming around, they just simply wanted to make a game for a pretty quick buck. And so they simply purchased a license for this, changed the sprites to be in a T-Rex, and bam, you got a We're Back game. But let's try to figure out, is the game, even though it's sort of a sprite swap game, is the game itself still pretty decent as a just a good platformer? And so let's go ahead and dive into We're Back, a dinosaur story for the Game Boy. Now I'd like to start the videos off by looking at the box art for the game first. And the box art for We're Back is pretty standard here. You got all four main dinosaurs from the movie on the cover here. You got the pterodactyl, the apatosaurus, the triceratops, and the T-Rex. And you're going to play through the game as a T-Rex. And I can't really remember any of the characters' names off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie, and they're mentioned so briefly inside the game itself. But the cover here, I mean, it's designed to look like a tie-in to the movie, and it looks exactly just like that. So if you purchased this game, you knew what you were in for, and I feel like they summarized that pretty well. But while we're at it here, since this is a sprite swap game, let's go ahead and look at the covers for the other regions. Baby T-Rex, I mean, you can see here, they didn't really have to change a ton for this particular one because you're playing as a T-Rex just like you are in the main game here for We're Back. And these enemies down here are also in the game itself, the giant mechanical dinosaurs that you're fighting against. The other one here, when you go to Agrostar, you also have the giant mechanical dinosaur off to the side, the palm trees from the backgrounds, also riding the skateboard because the skateboard is a huge part of the game. And then for Bamsy, man, like Bamsy, I don't have a clue like how this relates to the actual game itself. Like there's like nothing on the cover for Bamsy, but hey, I guess it still fit with the sprite swap, so whichever. But we're not covering those games with those sprites. We're covering We're Back, so let's go ahead and dive into the actual game. Now when you start the game up here, you got a very standard little title screen. It's just simply the main characters, just simply says the title of the game. But if you just give it a second, the story will begin to play. And the story basically is, I believe, the same as the movie. A scientist goes back in time to basically give brain grain, which is like a cereal, to these dinosaurs. They eat it, they become intelligent. They're going to bring them back to New York City to display them inside of a museum. However, Dr. Screw Eyes, or Professor Screw Eyes, shows up and captures 3 of the dinosaurs, not the T-Rex, but the other 3. And basically, your job is going to be to try to rescue those 3 dinosaurs. Now, that part, I don't know if that's part of the movie or not. I remember like most of the movie taking place in New York City, current day, where this entire game is going to take place back in prehistoric times. And so I'm not sure like the game lines up perfectly with the movie, but there are some things that are the same, such as like the brain grain cereal, some of the characters inside of the little video here, Dr. Screw Eyes, all that is in like the actual movie. However, like, I don't think it's going to follow along with the actual storyline. I think it's just simply the main characters. Now, there is a 1-player mode and a 2-player mode. However, it's not like a separate game. It's sort of like how Mario 1 was, how one player, you know, plays until they die, and the second player picks up, and they continue to play until they die, and it goes back to the player 1, and you just simply pass the Game Boy back and forth when it's your turn. And so, I can't say it's like an exciting 2-player mode for the Game Boy, but it is at least a multiplayer game. Now when you start the game up here, the first world is going to be called the Jungle, and the jungle is going to be very much of a prehistoric aesthetic here. You know, got the little palm trees in the background, different dinosaurs that you're going to fight against, like little pterodactyls, stones that are going to come flying at you, these giant ants, which are pretty tough to kill actually. But the game itself is, you know, a nice little aesthetic, but the game's going to look very, very similar, at least in the first world here, to Sonic, because like you're going down these little hills, and of course you can speed up by pushing forward. You get like a little speed, you know, a little air blowing against the little dinosaur here, his little tongue sticking out the side, and it's a cool little aesthetic. But it's very much of a ripoff of Sonic. I mean, even like down to like little springs that you're gonna hop on, little spikes that you can run into. Even the idea of like you collect all of these little brain grain cereals, which looks like almost like little milk cartons, but you collect those, and then if you get hit, you lose all of those, sort of like you lose your rings in Sonic. And so, to some degree, it's borrowing a lot from Sonic, but I can't say it's borrowing a lot of the, I guess, overall charm from Sonic. Because the game, for the most part, feels very generic as you're going through here. There are some fun little animations, like I said, when you're going down a hill pretty fast, you know, the wind against your dinosaur. There's also, if you like, you know, pause for a second, dinosaur does like a little dance around and whatnot. And also, like later on in the game, like when he's riding the skateboard, there's some little sprite animations for that as well. And so there's some cool like little sprite animations, but the overall charm of the game itself, it's fairly generic. Now, I did mention earlier how you're going to collect these little brain grain cereals, and that's going to be your ammunition as far as like shooting it out and attacking the dinosaurs or attacking the different enemies. And it's actually fairly hard to like get these sprites to line up just right. I oftentimes hit like above the dinosaur or below the dinosaur. I'm trying to hit it, and these little ants down here, like my gosh, like it's almost impossible to hit these ants with the brain grain cereal. You have to get the angle just perfect from far away, and I never actually did it, and I just always jumped around the ants. But the cereal is actually fairly hard throughout the entire game, except for the bosses, to aim and actually hit the enemies. And so I ended up, for the most part, just sort of running by and jumping over or trying to avoid the enemies, and that worked pretty darn well as I went. But the aiming against the enemies is fairly hard. Now when you get to the end of the level, you get to this little exit stone, hit the exit stone, and of course you finish level 1, and then you go into Jungle Part 2. Now Jungle Part 2 is going to be pretty much identical to Jungle Part 1 as far as like aesthetics go. However, you are going to get this new enemy here who looks more like a dragon instead of a dinosaur, and that's a little bit out of place inside the game here because dragons are not the same as dinosaurs. This is not like, you know, medieval times where we didn't understand what dinosaur fossils were. But regardless, he can shoot out these little fireballs at you. You can avoid those pretty easily. It only takes 2 hits to kill. And there's also this pretty cool little animation scene where you actually like rest inside of a dinosaur nest, and a little pterodactyl will come down and pick you up and carry you off to another part of the level. And so this level here is going to be more of a vertical level, where the first level is more of a horizontal. And so they are trying to mix up as far as like the gameplay a little bit, but as an overall, it's still pretty much the same type of game as the first level. Now the third jungle level is going to be another vertical level, but instead of going up, you're going to be going down, almost like into like a cave area. I went through this level fairly fast, and I think the game itself can be played pretty quickly, sort of like Sonic can be played, but you almost have to have the level somewhat memorized, and I think I got some lucky jumps here for the most part. But I went through this one pretty fast, and so there really wasn't anything like to note inside this one, except it's another vertical level, and you're going down instead of up. And then you get to the first boss in the game, who's like a skeleton brachiosaurus, and I'm guessing it's actually more of a mechanical brachiosaurus, judging from the covers of the other regions here. However, he's going to be a pretty easy boss here. He shoots out little projectiles, very easy to avoid, very easy to dodge. You have infinite ammo fighting against him. And once you destroy him, you simply go off to the right, hit the little exit sign, and you've completed the first world, which is going to be the jungle world. It's also here that you rescued the first of your dinosaur friends, which is going to be Dweeb. And once again, I couldn't remember the names, so they were inside the actual game itself. But you rescue Dweeb, and you get a nice little cutscene here with Professor Screw Eyes. And now we're going to head into the second world, which is the Crystal Caves. Now the cave aesthetic here is going to be very similar to like Donkey Kong Land on the Game Boy. You know, you have like little snakes that are going to drop down from the ceiling. You have, you know, little lava pits, the darkness of the cave. I mean, it's a very standard cave looking level. However, the biggest thing in this level is you're going to get a little skateboard, and the skateboard allows you to pretty much zoom through the level a little bit faster. And there's some pretty cool little animations here on the skateboard, like when you jump in the air, you're doing little tricks and whatnot. And I actually wondered, like, is this even part of the We're Back movie at all? So I looked up some screenshots and some videos from the actual movie, and I can't find anything where they actually were on a skateboard. And so I think it's one of those holdovers from the just simply changing the sprites out. But still, I mean, it's a pretty cool little aesthetic inside the game, and it's a welcome addition as far as like mixing the gameplay up. But overall, I feel like this level was pretty easy, except for like some of the lava pits and things like that. But overall, not too bad. Now the second level in Crystal Caves continues to try to mix things up a little bit. You get the skateboard back again, and now they're adding in a bowling ball, and you can of course roll the bowling ball, and it goes through and basically knocks all the enemies out in front of you. And it's pretty fun. They're going to try to using the bowling ball more and more throughout the rest of the game, and it's never as beneficial as it is in this particular level here, because it just sort of gives you wide open spaces to sort of knock all these enemies out. and it's pretty fun. There are also some dragonflies in this level, which fit with the prehistoric aesthetic. I mean, you're going to have, giant dragonflies back in dinosaur times, so that fits pretty well inside the level. But once again, this is going to be pretty similar to the first cave level. Now, the third cave level here is going to try to mix it up a decent bit as far as like difficulty-wise, because you get on the skateboard, and a lot of times the skateboard is almost like a trick skateboard. And what I mean by that is it's simply going to get you overconfident as far as your speed goes, and it's going to send you straight into your death here. And sometimes that gets a little bit annoying, and this happens a lot inside this game, especially the more you progress, is you get on these areas where it's like you meant to go fast, or used to going fast from what the game has given you so far, and then it leads you straight into like a giant spike or a giant hole, and you just simply don't know when to jump unless you've played the level before, and you just simply end up dying. And that can get a little bit on the frustrating side, but they do give you plenty of extra lives inside the game. You got a ton of continues to go as well, and so you're not really ever going to have a trouble of like, losing the entire game. But some of the stuff can get a little bit frustrating. And then I got a bonus stage somehow, and I have no idea like how I got a bonus stage, but it said I got a bonus stage. But of course I get going pretty fast, and I run into a group of spikes, and then the bonus stage is over. And so like I squandered the entire thing because I ran into these spikes here. And so bonus stage wasted. Now the boss for the second level here is going to be a giant pterodactyl, and the pterodactyl is going to drop down little eggs at you. It's going to hatch out, and smaller pterodactyls are going to come out and try to attack you. And it's basically sort of a, keeping up with the surroundings, attacking the smaller pterodactyls from hitting you, while at the same time trying to, fire your little brain grain at the main pterodactyl, getting ready to take him out. This reminded me a lot of the Snow Brothers level in for the NES or for the Game Boy, where you have these giant birds that are dropping eggs to come at you. It's a very similar gameplay to that. And it's a nice little mix-up from the first level, and so at least the bosses are a little bit on the varied side as you're going through here. And when you defeat the pterodactyl here, you rescue your second friend, which is going to be Boggs, and you're going to be heading on into the next level, which is going to be the castle dungeon. Now the aesthetics for all the levels inside the castle dungeon world here is pretty much going to be pretty standard for a castle, but the one thing of note is this giant skeleton in the background of a human. Now the lore inside the game here is this is taking place back in prehistoric times for the most part. You are a dinosaur, a T-Rex, one of the largest creatures to ever walk the earth here, and in the background you have a skeleton that is literally like probably 5 times your size. So like how huge were these giants inside the lore of this Weirback game here? And obviously I'm reading way too much detail into it, but sometimes it's fun to think about like the overarching lore of a game, and to think that these humans were captured, held in the dungeon. They're so large, like what kind of creature captured them? And so I mean, like, I don't know, I found it entertaining at least. When I saw it, my brain started going in that direction. Probably focused more on that than the actual game itself, because I was like, that's pretty fascinating. But the castle dungeon, for the most part, it looks like a castle. Now this particular level here is probably one of the hardest in the game thus far, because you have a lot of new obstacles that you're going to be trying to avoid here. You have these little Dracula drips is what I'm going to call them, a little Dracula looking head dripping down blood at you. You also have these brachiosaurs that are inside the water shooting at you. You have to like hop on their back and then hop on another part of their back, and on their tail it's going to sort of catapult you up in the air. You have a new looking pterodactyl inside this level. You have a new dinosaur that's like shooting projectiles at you. And so this level here, they like really mixed it up as far as like bringing new things into the levels. And even though you're still using like your skateboard and your bowling ball and your brain grain cereal, they add enough in this particular level that's going to make it feel somewhat fresh. Now in the Castle Dungeon Stage 2, it's going to be pretty much more of the same. The only real difference here is they actually, when you have the little nest here, when the pterodactyl came and picked you up earlier, now you have like this little shell dinosaur with like a little helicopter on his back that picks you up and moves you from one area to another. And I know that's a very minute thing, but as far as like differences between level 1, level 2, Castle Dungeon, that's really the only thing you're going to notice. And the same thing can be said for Castle Dungeon Part 3. There's going to be more leaps of faith, a few more traps, but for the most part, same aesthetic, same enemies, and they're not really mixing it up. But then you get to the boss of this level, and this is like one of the best bosses in the entire game, especially like when it comes to difficulty wise. You have this, which I presume is a mechanical stegosaurus, even though it looks sort of like a bony stegosaurus here. And it can shoot out the little, I guess the spikes on its back, also shooting projectiles out of its mouth here. And you have this little platform that you keep hopping on, and you have to keep hopping, otherwise it goes out like down into the water and you die that way. And there's so much to keep up with in this particular boss fight. I probably died 2 or 3 times because this is definitely the hardest part of the game thus far, but it's also one of the most unique parts of the game as far as like having different things to keep up with, having to like develop an actual strategy to fight against this boss. And so this boss right here, a great addition to the game. and I wish the game had done more of things like this. But after you defeat the Stegosaurus here, you rescue your last friend, who's the pterodactyl, and at this point Professor Screw Eyes shows up and says, hey, you may have rescued him, but I'm just going to do it all again because you didn't defeat me. And then of course we're like, hey, you know, you're right about that. And so now we're going to go fight Dr. Screw Eyes at his actual castle here, or his actual tower. And so the final level is simply going to be journeying through Professor Screw Eyes' tower. Now, just like the other worlds, there are 3 levels inside the tower, and they're all pretty much going to be the same. So I'm not going to break down every one individual here. This world, more than any of the other ones, is going to be filled with, like, you know, fake traps or sort of fake you out jumps of, like, get you overconfident on going fast on your skateboard, running you into a group of spikes, or going down fast down a hill, and it just opens up into a giant lava pit if you don't jump at the exact right moment. And so there's a lot of, like, little traps inside the tower, and at some points it does feel a little bit on the unfair side. But like I said, they give you so many extra lives in the game. They give you so many opportunities for continues in the game. I really don't think anyone's going to have trouble, like, actually finishing the game. You're just going to get sort of frustrated, like, oh my gosh, I fell into another hole and they tricked me again. But it's not going to be a difficult game. You sort of have to memorize where all the traps are going to be. The only new enemy inside the tower is going to be a Triceratops with a giant cannon on it, and I mean, it's a pretty cool looking aesthetic, but once again, like, a lot of this doesn't fit with, like, the actual movie of We're Back. This is just simply, like I said earlier, the swapping of sprites for a game that doesn't really belong in. And so when you finally get to Professor Screw Eyes here, you get to him and there's a 2-stage boss fight. The first part, he's going to be in a giant mechanical dinosaur here, shooting out little projectiles at you. You just simply have to jump up and try to, you know, hit the dinosaur itself with your little brain grain cereal. I tried to cheese him a little bit by trying to get, like, underneath him and try to hit him that way. That didn't work. Those shots didn't, like, register on him. And so you do have to fight him pretty much normally here. And of course, after the first part, he goes into stage 2, where he, like, sort of floats in the air, drops these little bombs out at you, and of course has, like, little flames that come off from the bombs. Just jump over them, fire your little brain grain at the actual professor, and it doesn't take too long. You've actually defeated him as well. And of course, after you defeat him, you get a very short cutscene. And when I say short cutscene, it's literally like one single image of a little caption there. Awful, awful ending of the game. And then you get to enter your name as a high score, and I messed up and only got to put the letter O in there because I hit the wrong button. And then the credits begin to roll, and these are like the shortest credits of any game I've ever seen. It was like 5 pages of credits with maybe like 10, 15 names, and it was over. This is a very small development team that made this game, and I'm going to guess that the studio behind We're Back got the rights to this particular platforming game pretty darn cheap, and that's why they went with it, because they can make the most money off the game itself. And another reason I think this game probably sold pretty cheap is because so many different companies use this game for their own sprite swapping, for their own marketing, to try to make money on it at the same time. And so I think the development of this game was very short, very small team, and they sold off pretty cheap just simply to recoup their losses. However, even though all of that's been said, is the game itself like an awful, awful game? I really don't think so. I mean, there's a plenty of stuff inside the game to sort of mix it up as far as like making a fun platforming experience. I mean, you got like the bowling ball, the skateboard, you know, a variety of different dinosaurs, a variety of different enemies. Some of the stuff, you know, feels a little cheap as far as like, you know, dying a little bit. Some of the stuff feels like a little bit of a ripoff of Sonic in some ways. But I mean, the boss battles are pretty fun. Some of the platforming action was pretty decent. I mean, is it a game you're going to write home about and be like, man, this game was awesome, I can't wait to play it again? No. But is it a horrible game? It's like broken in a lot of ways? Absolutely not. It's just simply a run-of-the-mill, movie-based platforming adventure. I mean, it's not a great game. It's not a horrible game. It's not broken. But it's not something you're going to go back to very often. But what do you all think? If you played We're Back, a Dinosaur story for the Game Boy, did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments down below. If there's a game that you want to see me cover sooner than later, let me know the name of that game in the comments down below as well. I'll move it up in the queue. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos listed up above, and go out there, find a great game to play. Just simply have a great rest of the day.